Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Alberta Library Student Symposium, where we have a lovely suite of panelists here to talk about their experiences and give advice about interviews, getting jobs, what to do in their early careers, and more. So while everybody's coming in, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Alberta Library, the people that me and my coworkers that are putting on this event. So TAL is not a library, even though the name says that. What it is a consortium, which is basically a nonprofit that is member driven, and it includes almost all the libraries in Alberta. We support special libraries, academic libraries, and public libraries through things like digital licensing across the province to lower prices. We do accounting services, other general resource pooling, or things like this. We try to make these events happen. We also work on the Stronger Together conference. So that's that. And most other provinces have consortiums if you don't really know much about that. And Canada is also special in that we are one of the few countries that has a national consortium, which is called Consortia Canada. Works the same way, but all the consortiums are part of that one. It's a little bit meta. Um, so yeah, I guess we've only waited 1 minute. That was quicker than I thought to say that little piece. But since I have a little bit more to say, I will just start on that. So I just want to say thank you all for coming, and I want to thank the panelists for giving their time to share their expertise and things like that. The panelists are going to speak in turn for the first third of the event, giving their education and career path history, which will give all of you hopefully a taste of the variety available within the library sector and the variety of types of education or just the weird paths that a lot of people follow when they get into libraries. At least I know mine was kind of strange. Um, After those are done, I'm going to pose some more generalist questions to the panelists for a little bit of time, and then once that is over, it'll open to a open Q&A. You can use the chat if you want, but please put any questions you have into the Q&A. And also, panelists, please feel free to interact in the chat or to answer questions in the Q&A while you're not speaking if you'd like. That's completely fine. This event is being recorded, and it will be sent to anyone who registered, so don't worry about that, and it'll be up on TAL's website once it's ready. There is also closed captioning available if you would like to use that. You just have to go to the little more option. At least that's how it looks on my screen, and you can show captions there. And there you go. So that's all the housekeeping. And so then I will open the floor up to Braden.
Thank you very much. So I'm Braden Cannon. I'm a private records archivist at the Provincial Archives of Alberta. I'll explain a little bit about what I do later, but in terms of my career path, I started off wanting to be a filmmaker of all things. So I definitely took a twisty path to get where I am. I wanted to be a filmmaker, so I started off in film school and studying filmmaking, but I found that I was more interested in the theoretical side of film and not so much the technical side. So I switched to a film studies program at Carleton University in Ottawa. And there they offered, as part of that course or that program, they offered a course on film archives. So I took a course specifically on film archives, and that kind of piqued my interest, and that led to an internship at the National Archives, or what was then called the National Archives, now Library and Archives Canada, and their audiovisual department. So I did a semester-long internship there, and it just kind of all built from there, my interests. So I decided to go back to school and do my master's in library and information studies at Dalhousie in Halifax, specializing in archives. And I still really wanted to be an audiovisual or film archivist, but I was open to wider archives experiences from there. And I worked at the Dalhousie University Archives for a bit when I was a student. I did an internship at the City of Halifax Archives, and then got a job out here in Edmonton at the Provincial Archives. But at the time, I was actually working for the University of Calgary because they had an agreement with the province where they could use a vault here at the Provincial Archives to store University of Calgary records. but they had to provide an archivist to look after it. So I was technically a faculty member of the University of Calgary for a couple of years while that arrangement was in place. They eventually built new storage facilities down in Calgary, and they took all their material back, and that was the end of that arrangement. But then I got another contract here through the Friends of the Provincial Archives Society. Worked on contract for them for a bit until I finally got hired on at the Provincial Archives on a permanent basis, where I do, like I said, private records. So anything that's not government records. So we collect records from across Albertan society, from families, individuals, businesses, non-profit organizations, non-government organizations, that sort of thing. So those are the kinds of records I work on. I collect in all media, not just film and audiovisual, but I do a lot of work in the audiovisual sector as well. So I collect and arrange, describe, and make accessible records of enduring value, as we say. And so that's the long and short of it for me. So I will pass it over to Sean.
Thank you, Braden. It sounds like we have some similarity in how we started. I tell people when I get students or soon-to-be grads asking me like about careers, do not model your career path on me. I have had the most ridiculous series of right place, right time, fortunate breaks. Um, so I got out of the army, went to Vancouver Film School, similar to Braden, film guy. Needed to actually pay rent. Screenwriting wasn't going to do it, and happened to graduate film school about 2 weeks before Vancouver Public Library ended their 4-year hiring freeze, and got hired in that first batch. And so my career in libraries began. Worked my way up through VPL for about 6 years. Got to work with their programming and learning group, got to do a lot of stuff in their makerspace, was one of the first people working in their makerspace. So I got to have a ton of experiences. Vancouver Public Library was not structured quite the same as Edmonton Public Library. So there was potential to move up into supervisory positions. So that was kind of where my career was going before my wife and I decided that we were going to get married and have a family, and so moved to Edmonton. Um, Along the way, I've done a lot of union and labor organizing work. And that kind of led me on a path to that, plus expecting to keep my whole career in public libraries. Led me on a path to getting a certificate in HR and labor relations and a certificate in public administration, which I then tidily folded up into my library and information tech diploma from MacEwan into a degree in governance, law, and management. I had, again, right place, right time. Just the December of my last year of school, one of my profs approached me and said, "Hey, are you interested in law? There's a practicum placement open." And so I ended up being brought into a law firm, which had not been my plan. Oh my God, I have the best job in the world. If you're exactly the right kind of nerd, if you have exactly the right enjoyment of dryness, but also versatility, working in a law firm is so exciting. I get to touch so many different things. And as a solo practitioner, I get to be so in control of my library and my information services and where I get involved with the rest of the firm. So it's really allowed me to spread my wings. And I have come now to have very firm opinions. I think there is a future for all of the students here in private industry as information and research professionals. I think gradual enshittification is going to open up so many career paths for people as you utilize those abilities to teach people how to use things, to find good quality information. So I'll talk more about that and probably my actual work later as questions come in. But yeah, so a series of very happy accidents has led me to my career. Um, I hope it works just the same for everybody else. I feel like I've got time left, but I'm going to pass it over to Jesse Morris.
Okay, I've unmuted myself before I stopped talking this time. Woo! So yeah, my name is Jessie Morris, and I started out from an educational background. I did a Bachelor of Education, a Bachelor of Arts, and then I went on to do my MLIS at the School of Library Studies at the U of A. So initially I was a teacher and I mostly taught in rural communities, where basically like they're just so happy to have you, but they will literally jam you anywhere that needs like any hole that needs filling. And so you have to be really versatile and really willing to just sort of fly by the seat of your pants. And I mentioned that because that is one of the most important like qualities that I developed, that led to all of my future success. Oh God, I just referred to myself as successful. Now I've jinxed it. Okay. So, anyways, from there, I went on to do my master's at the U of A. And while I was doing that, I got a summer job at EPL where I was a summer programmer. And once again, flying by the seat of my pants all the time, doing programs with seniors and children. And it was really great, but it also got my foot in the door. EPL can be notoriously hard to get into and hard to move up in. But taking a summer job created kind of a platform for me to apply for further jobs. And so I successfully managed to land a permanent position at EPL. And then after I graduated, I was hired as a community librarian, which where I was able to kind of leverage my bold, go anywhere, do anything attitude into a series of prison projects. And so I worked in all three of the prisons in Edmonton, the Edmonton Institute for Women, the Youth Detention Center, and also the Remand Center. And so on any given week, I would spend anywhere from like 2 to 7 hours doing programs with the people who were incarcerated in those facilities. And it was one of the coolest things I've ever done. And I still have a great deal of love for that kind of work. But that experience led to my next job. So I spent a year in Moose Jaw, where it was like one of the happiest times of my life. It was like not a complicated job. I was just really happy being the assistant head librarian. But from there, because I had all of this wild experience working in the prisons, I got hired as the library manager of the downtown library here in Regina. And the story that I always like to tell people is that in our first couple weeks of training, me and all of the other new library managers were kind of getting our feet under us, and we were working our first evening shift. And I was managing the downtown library, and my friend Christine was managing the South End library, the Bothwell. And so that night she met the Prime Minister of Canada, and I dealt with a guy who was masturbating on the floor of the library. And she was telling me her story. And I was like, you know, girl, we're going to have very different careers. So I was at RPL, and then I got fired. And I mentioned this because it's so terrifying to think of getting fired. And I want you to ask me questions about it if you want to. So it sucked, but it was also arguably the best thing that could have happened to me, because that was what led me to being very brave and moving up to Northern Alberta to take the job as the manager of member library services at Northern Lights, where I am right now. And I've been doing that for 5 years and I absolutely love it. But I probably won't stay too stationary in this role. In the last couple of years, I started to dip my toe into politics. I ran for city council, which I mentioned because, again, public servants should do those kinds of things. So if you're curious about it, you should ask me about it. And I'm very interested in leadership and cultivating kind of excellence from my team. And I have 15 seconds left, and I'm going to use them to hand things off to Jess.
Okay, thanks, Jessie. I have nothing nearly as exciting as that.
I've had a weird career.
Yeah. So yes, my name is Jess. I've had a series of shorter contracts for the most part. So I'm going to go sort of through what that looks like. In 2023, I graduated from MacEwan University's Library and Information Technology, or LIT, program. I also laddered into a BA at MacEwan afterwards with a major in philosophy. I went into the lit program as a mature student, meaning I had been out of high school for quite a few years and had worked full time before entering post secondary. All of that work experience was in retail management. And I also worked throughout my entire university career, usually doing, like I said, multiple contracts or part-time positions, usually all at the same time. I had 1 to 4 jobs at a time. Um, During the winter term of my first year, CQUA Radio posted a job to our program specifically, seeking student interns for data management. So I applied to that and was one of the selected applicants, likely because I had worked with data management, databases, spreadsheet, all that good stuff. It was a temporary 3-month contract, perfect for completing during a school semester and just to sort of get my foot in the door in the industry. Between my first and second years of the lit program in the summer, I applied to many library industry jobs, probably over 20, maybe over 30. I got exactly a callback from one. I interviewed for that position and thankfully was offered it. It was a library services assistant position at Northwest College. They offered it to me because I had done well in my first year reference course, but I think mostly because I had close to 10 years of customer service experience under my belt that I could pull from. I was also working as a research assistant for one of the lit professors, which had begun just at the end of the first year program and went through to the end of my second year. I also started right early in my career volunteering for library organizations. I volunteered for CAPL, for JELA. I did a little bit of volunteer work for the Prison Library Project, as well, doing an Indigenous research database that they were working on. Throughout my second year of the program, I continued with those volunteer positions, with the research assistant position, with the library assistant position with Northwest. With JELA, I was a student representative executive member, so mostly I helped plan and coordinate events. With CAPL, I was a communications committee member, so I ran their social media pages and helped with promotional materials. As a research assistant, I helped Doctors Noreen Erickson and Joanne Rogers with their emotional labor research projects through numerous tasks. That position particularly allowed me to sort of dive into the world of scholarly materials in the library industry, which I found really interesting and really enhanced my research skills. And then at Northwest, I was often able to go directly from class and apply that education that I had just learned to my reference work, which I found really helpful. I was mostly at the desk doing reference work, circulation work. I also did processing, some collection specific ordering, and I also did a lot of display works. At the end of my second year, I completed my practicum with the U of A archives. This allowed me to get specialized practical experience that I otherwise would likely not have had the chance to get. It was also just an incredible practicum experience. Northwest was flexible with me, so I worked and I did my practicum, which made for long days that definitely paid off in the long run. I loved Northwest, but I also wanted to try to get as much varied experience as I could. So I once again applied for numerous positions as the summer months, sort of the temporary seasonal work paid off. I was asked to interview for and was offered a seasonal library assistant position as a cataloger at Strathcona County Library. So I worked there throughout the summer cataloging, and then I shadowed in other departments as well, which is great. And I then got into a U of A archives assistant position for just under a year while I continued my post-secondary education. All of those temporary contracts were great, but I did ultimately end up in what is supposed to be a permanent position as a school library manager. So it's a solo position. It's a K-9 school right now. It'll be K-12 in the next few years. And I can talk about sort of what exactly that entails through the question period. So that's me, and I will pass it off to Shayna. And I hope I said that right. I'm sorry if I didn't.
No, it's okay. Thanks, Jess. So my background experience with my education, I would say, is a combination of Sean and Jess's a little bit. I was right place, right time, but also have had a lot of, contract temporary positions leading up to where I am now, as this is actually my first salary position that I've been in. So hi everyone, I'm Shania Sola. I am library technician at Bourbon University in Lacombe, Alberta. So my journey kind of started in this business sector. I decided back in Winnipeg, I'm originally from Winnipeg, Manitoba, right next to Saskatchewan, Jesse. And I did a 2-year business administration diploma in HR track, and decided, okay, maybe I want to go get my CPHR designation. So I went came over to here in Lacombe and continued my business education here at Berman in hopes of, as I mentioned, getting my CPHR designation and working in the HR sector. But along the lines, once I moved here, I was, a student looking for work. I um, always had a, interest in reading. It's always been one of my favorite hobbies. So I'm like, oh, maybe I'll go visit the library on campus and see if they're hiring, which is when I met my now supervisor, Sheila Clark, who happened to say, yes, I'm actually looking for students to work here at the library. And I worked as a student worker and made my way up to be the student supervisor here on campus while I was completing my business degree. And by the time my last semester here at Berman finished, I just fell in love with the profession. I figured if there's a way I could maybe use my business degree and work that into maybe potentially my idea at first was working in a corporate records management or business library. That was my idea at first, and I went ahead and applied to do my master's at Western University in Ontario, which I then moved out there to London to do my degree. And during that process, I was able to land a student position there at Western Weldon Libraries as a student assistant and help with reference desk help in the archives, help answer basic questions and shelf reading and various duties, interlibrary loans, and so forth. And I came back here, and Sheila reached out to me and she said, I'm looking for someone to help casually in our makerspace here in the library because we built this new library back in 2021, and it was starting to become more and more widely used by our students. And she needed someone who was, you know, well versed and knew some more information about how the makerspaces work in libraries. So I was hired casually here. And while I was working casually here, I was also working as an elementary school librarian in Red Deer. So I was working 2 jobs at once. And um, this past August, the position became available for a technician to join here at Berman permanently, which led me to where I am now. Um, I'm just gonna say, it didn't work. This was not how I thought things would come out. I would end up coming back to the school I studied at to work full time, and to my mentor now becoming my colleague and my supervisor. So it was kind of right place at the right time. And I'm very grateful that I have the privilege to work with people I already know, because I know that's not something that often happens in the workforce. So that is something I'm very grateful for. So, but yeah, I'll talk a bit more about, things about like moving from jobs and opportunities and so forth later on in the questions. And thank you. I'll pass it back to Cole.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm just gonna switch here back to this version. That was great. I love that. One of the things I love the most about this is even I don't know exactly everybody's story, and it's a surprise to me too. And great, you guys all did really good. And it was all really interesting to see differences and similarities between all of your guys's both education and just the way, yeah, the library, the jobs that you choose just kind of go, it's like a river. So now I'm going to ask some of the questions that I would assume most of the people came to listen to. And I'm just going to ask them, pose them to the whole group. And if you have an answer, please just like raise your hand physically or digitally, and I will just kind of call and we'll go classic that style. So the first question that I have is, what have you learned over your experiences is best for interviews? So preparing, during, or follow-up. You can also answer this from the interviewee or the interviewer angle, whichever one you feel you have the best stuff for. And we'll go right off the top. Jesse, go for it.
Um, so yeah, I'm keen on this one. I love doing interviews. And so when I'm interviewing people, one of the most important questions I'm going to ask you is about a time that you made a mistake. And so your ability to demonstrate humility, a sense of humor, and accountability above all else is like literally the number one green flag I'm looking for in an interview, because we are all human, and I need to know that when you fumble, you have the means of owning it and getting back up and moving forward in a positive way. And so being able to acknowledge, like, yeah, I fucked up, is so huge when you're interviewing with me. And then the other one is, I love a good story, but you have to balance being a good storyteller with some conciseness, because we can't go for 2 hours. So you have to learn to manage your stories and like kind of get to the point.
Yeah, honestly, one of the things that I was going to recommend, and one of the biggest things I remember from early librarianship is, yeah, you make a mistake, you tell someone immediately. And also, if you can come with a fix or the idea of a possible fix, that's really good. But like owning up as fast as possible is always going to be better than sitting on it or someone finding out about it without you saying anything. Sean, I believe you were next, and then Braden after.
Thank you. So I got a lot of practice with interviewing when I was with VPL. I managed to beat the odds. It only took 14 interviews as an internal applicant to get a full-time permanent position. I think the median had been about 16 at the time. So you get a lot of practice. And one thing that I have always found with VPL and with EPL is they're public sector, they're unionized, they have to be very transparent in how they're selecting. I don't know if this is universal, but it was my experience. And so looking at the interview process as a bit more of a oral exam almost, there was a tendency for things to be point marked. And so if you had, say, they're looking for 5 points on a question, you provide 7 that are all acceptable. Now everybody else who only answered 5, theirs are marked a little bit less. So there are some elements of that where it can feel sometimes like it's less about who's necessarily the best fit for the job and who's best equipped to navigate the interview process. So that's a thing to look out for, but I would recommend, if you can, speaking to somebody who is already there. Working in private now, completely different. It was a lot less about what specifically I knew or ticking any boxes. It was a personality fit. It was a matter of, well, okay, we're looking for a professional because we don't have somebody who does this. So you tell us what you know. You tell us how you can fit in, what you can do, what you can bring to the table. Advocacy, self-advocacy is a huge thing in every library environment, but especially in private, I find that it is something where people don't know what you do or what you can do. But they're very excited when you tell them, yes, absolutely, I can do that. So being very proactive and engaged going in. And then also, I mean, I've got a bunch of notes. I'll probably make them available to Cole later if anybody wants more detailed responses to this. But one pet peeve of mine that I would recommend is make sure you have questions for the interviewers. It shows that you're engaged and that you're looking ahead. Do a bit of research, have good, useful questions. Don't jot them down on a phone. Bring a notebook with you. Bring a physical notebook. Write your questions in that. Write your notes or any information you pull from the interview in that. It looks so much better than pulling out your phone, especially if you're sitting waiting in a lobby or a waiting room. It just gives a better first impression than sitting there on your phone, even if it's something relevant. Also, whoever lets you in, if you're coming in outside of hours, be kind and personable to the admin staff or whoever's there. Learn their name. Be polite. That you would be surprised how often that's the make or break after an otherwise fine interview was how were they to the staff. So yeah, that's fast and dirty. Again, I could talk a lot because I have the conciseness issue that Jesse mentioned. But I'll pass that on. I think Braden was next there.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was just going to follow up on Jesse's point about conciseness. Having been on both sides of the interview equation, often the interviewers are taking notes, and the interviewee is speaking, and there might be a lull or a silence, and a lot of people just want to fill that silence and might start repeating themselves or trailing on. And meanwhile, the interviewers are just trying to catch up on notes, and it's not a symbol or a sign that they're expecting you to say something more or waiting for you to say something that they want to hear. So I think my best bit of advice is to say what you want to say, and then once you've said it, just let that silence sit if they're taking notes, and don't feel nervous about that because that's a completely common thing. Absolutely.
Jess?
I think the only thing I could add to this is that other than it being personable and all about sort of how you make a connection and finding the right balance is when you're preparing for an interview, doing solid research about the company you're applying for really comes in handy. Like you should know sort of what their vision, mission, value statements are. You should know what their hierarchy or their organization looks like if they're transparent about it, where you'd be in that organization. And also, if you're coming into the library industry new and you don't have direct library experience, think about all of those other jobs that you've done and what your transferable skills are. If you're going in for an interview for an assistant position, you know you're going to be working the reference desk. Think about how your customer service being a grocery clerk has transferred over, and think about a few really specific scenarios that you could pull from when they ask you questions like, when did you make a mistake? What did that look like? Or when did you deal with a really terrible patron? What did that look like? Because there tend to be quite a few scenario like questions in interviews. And if you can have a few of those in your pocket, in your notebook, prepared, then you can pull from them really quickly and say, like, here's what I've dealt with in this other industry. It's not directly library related, but it is people related. And we're in a people oriented, a human oriented business. And I know how to talk to people, and you can sort of go from there. So doing that specific research and having stuff prepared is going to help. It's also going to help the nerves when you go in. Yeah.
Shania?
Yeah, so the one thing I would also add to what everyone's been sharing is, once you have the follow-up and if you are offered a position, don't be afraid to, number one, be vulnerable, and number two, advocate for yourself. In the library field, we advocate for libraries, but sometimes we forget to advocate for ourselves in the position so we can advance in our careers. Because in my very specific situation, I was hired in a position that didn't require technically a master's degree. So when I was offered this position, I was vulnerable and I said, hey, I have these qualifications, I have this background. Um, in for many years, we were working here or in past jobs. What could we possibly negotiate, salary, professional development options. Is there something we could negotiate here? And it's because I was able to advocate and speak up for myself, I was able to have more flexibility in my position now and do more library master level work in my position, even though I have a technician position. So that is something I would also add to this.
Thanks, Sean.
Sorry, if I can just follow up on that, because I completely agree. I am in the very rare position of being a library tech doing a librarian's or in a librarian role. Whereas I think it's so much more common to see librarians who are in library tech roles just due to availability of jobs. So 100% I second that self-advocacy, but also if you're in an environment where negotiating things like your salary, that sort of stuff is permissible, do your research ahead of time. 100% know what you're worth. A lot of the professional associations will do salary surveys. You can also look at things like, I think it's A-lists or some. Alberta has a page where you can look at the broad salary demographics for different job positions and scopes. Take that information in, make use of that, negotiate from a point of evidence as opposed to, oh, I don't know, I hadn't been thinking about money, whatever you think sounds good, because you will not get your best offer from that.
Thanks. Yeah. So that actually is a nice segue into the next question I have, which is, do you have any specific advice regarding resumes or CVs? I have one thing that's just very funny working at the Alberta Library is the amount of cover letters that I get that talk about being excited to work with books and excited to work with patrons when this is like a quarter, almost, this is more than a quarter of the size of our office, and there's no books here. Well, there's a couple books. But that, because people don't do their research, they're just kind of throwing these things out, or they're just assuming based on the name. I don't interview those people because if they're not going to take the time to look at our website, even a little bit, then yeah. So that's a big thing for cover letters and resumes that I would say, like, it really does matter that you put something in that cover letter, at least to me, that says you know who you're applying to and why you would want to apply to these people. Jana.
Yeah, so for me it's two things. Number one, if you're applying for a job and they're only asking for like a cover letter and resume, curate your resume from your CV. You don't have to look at the job description, look at the skills they're looking for, look at the tasks and different things they're asking for, and take what your experience has been and copy and paste. That's what I have been doing my whole career as a student, going up to now. Um, and only have your CV with you if they ask you. And do your research. Know the difference between a resume and a CV. CV is everything you have ever done in your employment history, your education history, volunteer work, everything. Whereas resume, you're tailoring it to what the job you're applying for. And also make sure you're updating your CV. As a student, I know you're thinking about finishing your courses and just focusing on what you're doing now. But any job you ever have, doesn't matter if it's temporary, if it's part-time, make sure you're constantly updating your CV, your volunteer work and awards, so you have that record. So when the time comes to apply for different jobs, you know exactly what might match well with the position you're applying for.
Thanks. Sean?
100% want to second what both of you have just said. Do your research. If you're applying for a law firm, know whether or not they practice criminal versus just civil law. These sorts of things are, like you say, they are interview losers, like as in losing you out on getting an interview. But also, should I 100% on have I do the same thing. I have my core, like permanent sort of CV that I pull from or I tailor to a resume request or a CV request for any job. And I think that's a much smarter way to do things. You don't want to have to go back in your hard drive or your memory 5, 10 years to try and think, how can I add XYZ experience on? But outside of just the like interview process, when you're in a job or when you are doing your practicum placements or whatever else you have, um, think ahead to your PA, your performance appraisal. Back from my Army days, I've maintained the habit of what we called a brag sheet. Anytime you do anything cool or interesting or useful through the year, through your job, write it down right then. Make a note of it. Make like all the details that are relevant so that when you go into that, okay, you finished your practicum, let's interview for a permanent, or let's go a performance appraisal or a job application down the line. You'd say, hey, look at these exact things I have done. Look at how I've been useful or proactive or whatever else, and then you're not scrambling like most people do about 2 to 10 days ahead of your performance appraisal trying to put it together and justify, hey, here's what I've done for the last year.
Jesse?
My advice is very simple in nature, and it is about keeping your resume as simple format wise as possible. When I see a resume that looks like somebody spent like an hour formatting, I am kind of like, this person doesn't know how to use their time well. And I become less interested in that candidate. Also, do not use AI to write your cover letter, because I'm going to run it through a checker, and I am not going to give you the time of day if I see that you used AI to do your homework.
Yeah, that's new, interesting things.
Mhm.
Also, one other thing about cover letters that I discovered too late in the game when I was doing it is you write so many cover letters that honestly, and they're all sort of similar but slightly different, is take them thematically, the pieces that you're using to put in your cover letter, and just start making a Word doc that just has a whole bunch of like, this is my customer service blurbs. These are my data management blurbs. And then after a while, you'll just have ones that you can cut and paste and just make new ones that work for new jobs. So they're tailored, but they're not you constantly looking up new things. Obviously, you do need to, the research bit about the specific job will have to be new every time, but there's only so many ways you can say that I'm good at customer service. That's new or different for each job. Okay. Oh,
Can I
sorry,
just add
Jesse.
one thing before we
Yeah,
move on?
totally.
One piece of advice that I would add on is, as you get like deeper into your career and you're not applying for jobs as frequently, I would honestly treat your cover letter more like, I was going to say a love letter, but like without the romance, like kind of like a sort of like a letter of introduction to your passion and to like the meaningful ways that you connect with the job. And so I write my cover letters, and it's very rare that I apply for jobs now because pretty much I'm just so happy. But I would just suggest that, like, as you get deeper into your career, to to kind of allow the possibility of a more organic cover letter that sort of like is almost like a correspondence to the job ad, and try to kind of make it more conversational and personable, because when you reach a certain level, I want to see like some personality in there, and I want to see that this wasn't um like sent to 10 different organizations. I want it to have been addressed to, and if you can, find the name of the hiring manager. My name is on every freaking job ad I post. Address it to me, please. That's it. That's all I got.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting that, yeah, cover letters can kind of change over time where you are kind of in your career. Like I work with Canada Summer Jobs, so it's hiring people between 15 and 30, and it's a different kind of caliber of cover letter, but Not nothing, but not like not too crazy. All right, so that's that one. All right, so the next one that we're gonna do here. So we're gonna talk about, does anyone have any advice for, oh, sorry, I'm gonna switch it up. We're gonna do the moving one. So does anyone who has moved for a job have thoughts on that and how well or for them, anything they would give advice for, maybe do it a little different? Or yes, I knew there was a couple. You guys. So is Braden first, then Jesse.
Yeah. So I grew up in a military family, and to me, moving is not a big deal. But the way I see it is, you can be very picky and selective about what job you want, or you can be very picky and selective about where you want to live. But it's very rare to get both of those together. Um, so coming out of grad school, I was very picky about the job I wanted. I really wanted to work in private records, in archives, in public archives or academic archives. So that job opening came up, and at that point, I had never been further west than Ottawa. I had no connections to Alberta or Edmonton whatsoever. Um, but and it was only a year contract when I came out west, so I knew that it may not work and that I would have to move again. But I wanted that job and I wanted that experience, so that was the main thing for me. So um, because it was a gig with the University of Calgary, they did offer some relocation expenses. They didn't pay for everything, but they did pay for a bit of it. Had it been for the government of Alberta, they would not have done any of that. But so that kind of worked out well. But you just kind of have to sometimes take that chance for that job. And remember, if you're relocating for a job, you can claim it on your taxes too. So something to keep in mind. And so yeah, just be open to the possibility, even if you don't have any connections where you're moving.
Jesse.
I also want to advocate in favor of moving for a job. It's really exciting. When I moved up to Bonnyville to take on the role that I'm in now, I was terrified. I had like in the last couple of years gotten divorced and bought my first house, and like leaving literally everybody that I knew and truly, truly starting fresh was so daunting. And I was watching like Virgin River and trying to like amp myself up for living in like a small town when I was used to living in a big city. And so I did all these things to like amp myself up, and it was totally worthwhile. But I would also say, here's where you really want to like practice your kind of like data gathering and your analysis skills. So when I was contemplating moving up to Lakeland, I'd also been offered a job in Coquitlam and a job in the Yukon. And so I was contemplating what kind of life I could build for myself in each of those communities. So I was researching rentals, and I was researching commutes, and I was researching social skills. I made a Hinge account, and I landed it in each of those places to see what kind of people were online. Like I gathered so much freaking data to help me make the best decision. And so here's where like Jesse, the life coach, really like chimes in. If you are going to be really intentional about building your best life, and I want to emphasize here that you deserve your best life, so you should know what that entails. You need to be that intentional about picking where you're going to go, I would argue, because you're not just a body doing a job. You're a whole ass person who deserves to have a full enriched life. And so I ended up choosing Bonnyville out of the other places. Coquitlam has continued to come for me over and over again. They're like, what about now? What about now? And I'm like, hey, are housing prices still insane? Yeah. Okay. Not now. So anyways, turning down we haven't talked about this, but turning down a job is not even like the end of the road. But if they like you, they'll probably like keep calling you, which is great, very flattering. But yeah, you can't have too much data when you're making that decision.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, I haven't necessarily moved for a job, but when I moved to Halifax to do my master's, one of the big things was the difference between tax between Alberta and anywhere else, actually, really any other province, since Alberta has the lowest tax. And that's something on all goods, which really does affect living in Nova Scotia ended up being almost the same price as here, which is interesting, like as a big city. Anyway, next was Shania and then Sean.
For me, it was kind of working against my stubbornness because I'm not even 30 yet. I'm probably the youngest person on this panel. I'm 29. I got married during COVID. I got married during COVID, right when I was entering library school. Right before I left for library school, my husband and I bought our house here in Lacombe. For those of you who are not maybe familiar with Lacombe, it's considered a city. I still consider it a town because it's a very small community here. Um, my husband has a professor position, but we are at very different stages of our lives, and I had to sit with, do I want to drive 2 hours to Calgary or Edmonton for work every day, or do I need to sit and be patient and only work with the opportunities and jobs possibly available in my area? And for me, I had to outweigh, what works with my well-being and what works for my family and try and find an even like a middle ground for that. So for me, it took me longer to find a job, but in the long run to me it was worth it because it worked well for my family and for my well-being, even though I had to be patient and work on my patience and be okay with maybe not getting the job I wanted right off the bat and be okay with that and sit with that. So that's also something that is absolutely okay, especially if you live in a small town or small area and you're not, willing to commute as far for a job. That is also okay. But also just realize you have to be more patient. You have to be patient and it will come. It will come. Just one day at a time.
Thanks, Sean.
So I have not moved for a job in my library career, but I would follow up with what Shania had said. Um, when my wife and I decided to move to Edmonton, it took 2 years. Part of that was COVID came in, which put a damper on things because we moved in the spring of 2019. But it took 2 years before I was able to get a position with EPL and I had to work elsewhere. So if you are in that position where you're not able to get the job you want now, it is a great experience, opportunity if you can make it to develop some external skills. Some of those things like, management, supervision, problem solving, technical skills, whatever you end up doing, it's not wasted time if you make sure not to waste it. But also, yeah, the advice has always been, as far as I've heard it, there are library jobs so long as you're willing to move for them, and that's great if you're in a life stage where you can do that, but not all of us are, and don't let that discourage you from continuing down your career path. But also, I think the most important one that I wanted to say is if you're going to be moving anywhere outside of like the 10 largest cities in Canada, learn to drive. I know not all of us are big car fans. In my graduating like library tech class, I think less than a quarter of that class had driver's licenses, and that made a huge impact on what practicums they were able to get, where they were able to go for it, and what their career prospects were going to look like over the next couple of years because they couldn't move somewhere that doesn't have good transit and they couldn't even get to a lot of job sites. I think our car-based cities are a problem. That's its whole own panel conversation about urban design and like urbanization across Canada. But if you are going to be leaving, learn to drive. You don't even necessarily have to buy a car. There's lots of car shares out there, but it's a useful skill to have.
Thanks, Braden.
Yeah, just a quick follow up on that. It's not even just about living in rural areas. Here at the Provincial Archives, it is a job requirement for a lot of us to be able to drive because we have to go pick up records and things like that. So it is a good skill to have if you don't already have a driver's license. Definitely think about that.
Yeah, driving. That's useful for a lot of things, but cars, prohibitive sometimes. All right, so the next one we're going to do is has to do with once you've kind of gotten the job. Do people have any advice in settling in for the first month in a job, things to prioritize, that kind of early job stuff to focus on beyond the whole, if you make a mistake, admit to it, especially early on, because you have that sort of like shield of newness, which is quite forgiving. Shania.
Um, I think the biggest thing for me it was weird because I was working here casually and then I moved into a full-time position here, but it still felt like a new job for me because you have a whole nother um, level of responsibilities in the position. And for me, what really got me finding my own groove here was um, asking questions. Like, don't be afraid to ask questions. I cannot reiterate this enough. And this is coming from a very, very introverted person. I do not like attending big crowds or big events. I'm very shy, even though I might not seem so, but ask as many questions as you need to, because the sooner you know things, the easier you'll be able to find your groove and be able to fall into the position well. Get to know your colleagues. I mean, I work at a academic institution. If you see other people from different departments if you work in a bigger institution, get to know people around you. It's hard for me because my office is in the basement of the library in a corner, and students might not come down to the basement often. But yeah, try to come out of your shell, especially if you're introverted like me. Challenge yourself to make connections and build relationships with your colleagues because they can also lead to even maybe advancements later on in your career as well. So that would be my advice.
And I just have one thing about the question thing. In my opinion, you can ask a question once, you can ask a question twice, but maybe try not to ask it a third time. Maybe write down the answer on the second one. So I think it was Braden, then Jess, and then Jesse.
Yeah, so when you're first starting a job, there's going to be a lot of on-the-job training. You're going to be learning a lot, and that's all going to come. But to just kind of follow up on the previous point, I think it's really important when you first start working somewhere to get to know everybody, um, get on a first name basis with people, just be open. I'm an introvert as well. It doesn't come easy. You don't have to be best friends with everybody, but just you don't know how long you're going to be at any given workplace. You could be there for a short contract, could turn into longer. You never know. So it's good to spend those early days getting to know people and just being open and receptive and just nice, just friendly. You don't have to be extroverted. You don't have to change your personality, but just um, be somebody that other people will look to, be like, yeah, that person's all right. Yeah, good for them.
Thanks, Jess.
Yeah, a little bit of this echoes both of the last two sentiments. But first impressions last a long time. So if you come into a job thinking that you know exactly what to do or how to act, or because you know the technical processes of your role, it might come off as over arrogant. Like you want to be able to ask questions, like the last two people have been saying. And you want to sort of see if there's a best way to do your specific role in your specific environment, even though you know processes from your education about how to do X, Y, and Z or mark record or whatever it is. You also want to be charitable with people. Knowing how to ask questions is one thing, and also knowing that you don't know these people yet is a thing. Like you want to be charitable to them. And you want to be confident also, obviously, but knowing that you're new in that role, and it's important to sort of go in humbly, even if you're doing like a solo position. My current position is I'm the only library staff member in a full school. I'm building a library from scratch. Nobody else is telling me how to do my specific job, but it's really important that I ask about, say, like what the proper regulation in a school chain of command is. If I want a policy to go through, I need to know who to ask first, how to bring it up the chain of command without going over somebody's head or stepping on people's toes. If I'm ordering for teachers, I need to talk to those teachers first, and I need those teachers to like me before I just place orders for their classroom and then have them resent me for the rest of my life. So even if your job doesn't connect directly to everybody else's, it's really important to go in and sort of observe first, and then be able to advocate for yourself, be confident in your role, that kind of a thing. Like observation and charity comes first, I think.
I really like how Jess put that, observation and charity. That's such an amazing way. You want to move gently in your new workplace. Don't go in like the new star of the show, because these people have established themselves, and then they've got established pathways, and you don't want to come in and sort of like cause an enormous ripple. You want to God, I don't want to say you want to fit in, but like you want to integrate, not overtake. God, I just came up with that, guys. Isn't that brilliant? But then I know, right? You should all apply for jobs with me. We have so much fun. I have nothing open right now. But what I also wanted to say is that in that first month, something that's really important is to get a handle on the tools at your disposal, because something that has begun to really drive me crazy is when people ask me a question that is easily answered with the tools at their disposal that I already gave them access to. So it kind of tells me that they're going to be a bit lazy, and they're going to try to steal my brain cells and my time instead of doing the work themselves. And so that is something that I think it's important to be conscious of, is like, ask every question you need to ask, but only ask the questions you need to ask. Use the tools that you have, because you are a professional and you should be able to. But for God's sake, don't just think and not ask questions. I'm certainly not saying don't ask them.
Following on from fantastic advice from everyone there, I feel like I'm kind of just dovetailing in off the end of a bunch of different thoughts there. If you're an extrovert like me, try to spend especially your first month or few listening more than you talk. A, if you're an extrovert, B, if you're, say, fresh out of school or you're not super confident in your role yet, and there's that urge to, be a superstar, to show off everything you can do. Take time, see what actually needs doing, see how people are doing things, and learn those hard and soft power structures of who you should talk to when. Um, Part of all of this is, I know for me, I'm terrible with names, and I never feel more anxious in any social setting than when I'm in a position where I'm expected to do an introduction and I don't know one of the party's names. Do what you can about that. That will be helpful. People like it when you know who they are. But also, following on from what Jesse had just said there, I think it's incredibly, incredibly helpful, especially in your early days in any role. Do as much troubleshooting and problem solving for yourself as you can. That is, to me, the best way to learn things, learn where information is kept, learn where resources are and how they're apportioned throughout your institution. That will do wonders for your ability to deal with things. But part of listening and getting to know people is figure out as quickly as you can who knows things and who can quickly answer. It's all somebody who knows how to navigate the intranet or your staff benefits or a particular piece of software. Know who you can go and, oh my God, I have 18 things going on. Here's my roadblock. Can you help me through this in 5 minutes or less? Those people are lifesavers. That's one of the number one tips I give to our new articling students and summer students is talk to the legal assistants and the paralegals, the people who have this institutional knowledge. You're never too good for anyone to know something that you don't. So make sure you use those personal resources.
Yeah. So something about the talking to people and the asking questions that really works well to also the skills that are good to build, which is a question we're going to get to in a second, is, and I sort of touched on it already, is you kind of get to the point where you can, yeah, come with every question or anything you talk to people about with sort of a half idea of what the answer might be. So you can kind of help them, don't put so much work on the person to explain every single little thing, but say like, oh, I have this question. I used this tool, but it didn't work exactly how I thought. I use this tool or something like that, where it's like you are actually trying to help you help them, which I think goes a really long way, especially in libraries, because we're all doing so much data talking, teaching stuff that when you do it first, it's like, wow, okay, we're doing this cooperatively. We're teammates. We're trying together. One of the big things I loved at EPL was this thing called co-learning, where when you didn't know what you were teaching your patron on the computer, you just say, hey, we're going to do it together. We're going to learn, me and you, at the same pace. And it kind of puts you on the same level. It's that kind of idea. It helps, I think, also with the charitable thing that Jess said, where it's like we're all in this together. We're trying to make it work. And people love that, especially in new people. So going to another, I guess this is sort of, and this might be similar to the last question, but just to tease out any other little things is what skills would be most helpful for early career library, LIT, archives workers, and what's most transferable between sectors? Aside from, I guess we've gotten personability, the ability to ask questions that are supported. Anything other than that? And sorry, you guys all put your hands up at almost the exact same time. So let's start with Braden, just because I haven't heard from him in super long, and then we'll do Jess and then Sean.
Sure. So if you're interested in archives at all, I'd say the biggest skills that you could possibly have that will get you very far is any kind of technical skills related to digital records. Um, I'm sure now in any kind of educational environment, any school programs that you're taking, they're putting a lot of emphasis on that now. When I went to grad school, it wasn't as big of a thing, but digital archives is desperately needed skill across the board. So and that'll take you, like, it doesn't matter what kind of archives world you're in. And something that's also really handy to have and a bigger part of the job than they do teach you in school is relationship building. And it's not something you can study, but it's going to be a part of your job. So a lot of introverts like me might get into archives thinking that, oh, we can hide from the world in our vaults and we can just work with the records and it'll all be great. But eventually you're going to find yourself in the reading room on the reference desk, and you're going to need to, that's more of like a customer services kind of environment with researchers. But another flip side of that is you're going to be building these long-term relationships with some researchers, but more with records donors, people who actually donate their records to the archives. You cultivate these relationships, and it can go on for years or even decades. And it's, like I said, it's not something that you can really study in school, but just know that that's going to be a big part of your world in any kind of public-facing library or archives. But yeah, digital archives and relationship building.
Yeah, when I was in the archives, it was surprisingly personal. I enjoyed it, but it was a bit of a surprise for me. So some of the things I have to say about this is a bit of a repeat of what everybody's said so far, but I'll summarize. The practical technical skills are obviously going to help. And if you're in the lit program or some sort of similar program, you've been prepared and you've done well. You've prepared to do a plethora of jobs. It's basically taught you how to be a library manager in sort of any industry. But the things that can't be directly taught, like Braden was just saying, are the most transferable skills. They're the so-called soft skills. If you can adapt to expectations and environments, if you can collaborate with vastly different people, learn quickly, be emotionally and intellectually mature while managing different situations, if you can be humble and ask for help and know when you're wrong and when not to ask questions, like Jesse was saying, if you can show your confidence in your abilities and prove your competence without being pompous, like those are the types of soft skills that can transfer to any position. And you can do those things in an archives or as a manager or as an assistant. And you can sort of show that you can be good at what you do and a nice person. So that's all.
Thanks, Sean.
So media and AI literacy and finding skills. I'll just quickly over those. And shitification is coming for everything. I think one of the surest forms of job security that anyone with library experience or education is going to have is the ability to find things without Google. As search engine results degrade in quality, I think the ability to find high quality, credible information quickly is going to be incredibly useful across any industry. And being able to identify and guide people away from confident but incorrect information is a soft and hard skill that anyone should want to practice. But the other big one I would say is forward thinking and creative problem solving. I will warn everybody now, 9 times out of 10, if not more, the person who brings up a problem or an issue or potential pitfall is going to get tasked with fixing it. So if you're seeing something coming down the pipe that might be an issue, look into your solution process first. Like was said earlier about, bring your question with half of an answer. If, hey, there's a problem, here's what I've seen, here's what I think we can do about it. But also, my time in the public library, you're so under-resourced, you're so understaffed, you have so little budget. Nothing gets more, nothing is more easily approved than a $0 investment in your pet project or initiative or problem solving, what have you. So if you can come to somebody and say, hey, I have seen this, I think we can do this, and here's how I can do it for cheap or free, you are going to be everyone's hero, and you will have a lot more say over how things get fixed going forward.
Thanks, Jesse.
So these have been really good answers. And at first I thought I was not going to add anything because I didn't want to talk just to hear myself. But one thing did come to mind that I think is really important. And in any field and in any role, there are 3 things that will do you an enormous amount of good. So one of those is self-reflection, being able to do a little bit of self-analysis, a little bit of navel gazing, and think about like, what was my 100% there? Or like, how can I get to the outcome I really want? So that's one of them. Amazing communication skills. Always be working on your communication skills. It will do you so much good in every role. And then the third thing is navigating conflict. I always advocate for an outcome-based approach to any kind of conversation because, as they say, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And how do you get everybody to happy? Which is not to say fold like a cheap chair. It is to say prioritize, communicate, and self-reflect to get to good results.
Thanks. And one thing that I have to add that you might already know or not, is if you have like a dream job and you're not currently working at that, or just anything you want to kind of prepare for something, just paying really close attention to what all the job ads you're looking at are starting to, the patterns you'll see of like what kind of skills they want from you. Like if they want, the ones that I'm thinking of is like the archives where they're like, do you remember the rules for archival description? Kind of. So like would be going back and finding those and reading them. Or I think in the Q&A there was a question about this kind of thing, and just seeking out specific professional organizations. Like I started this job doing mostly the job that I have doing mostly tech and a very random stuff. But it evolved into records management, and I ended up joining ARMA, which is not something that a lot of librarians are in, but it was something that is library adjacent, and I had to search it out. And it's the Association of Records Managers and Administrative Assistants. It's kind of odd at the end, but it ended up being really great. And I could take an entire course, diploma on records management, and has kind of changed the course of my job that I'm even in. So just kind of paying attention to those kinds of things can really help. So we are actually getting up to our hour and a half. And I saw that there was stuff in the Q&A, but it had been answered. So, I mean, you guys can keep asking in the Q&A if there's anything else. But I do have one more question I'd love to ask because it's kind of the funky one, which is there anything that you wish you would have done differently in your career journey that like might have helped or would be useful for people to know? If not, congratulations, you guys. That's sick. Um, it seems like a lot of you guys kind of had that sort of happy accidents into useful things, and that's awesome. But hey, Shania, great, love it.
I think for me, it's more of I think going back to the whole being an introvert thing for me is to go to more, if you have the ability to go to conferences, to network,
Mm.
do it. Because again, I didn't do enough of it, in my personal opinion, during both my undergrad and master's. And I had to put a bit extra effort now to try and get out of my shell in a new position. So if you are like me, as I said before, try to make an effort to network, go to conferences, and also um, don't go into whenever you have a job, go into the job knowing, especially in librarianship, that our jobs are going to be ever evolving. It's, in my personal opinion, it's one of the fastest evolving professions. And you're always going to be learning something new. You could have a master's degree, and that is not going to be enough to prepare you for maybe 20, 30 years down the line if you are still in the librarian profession. So be aware that these, you're always going to be learning something new, and be open to that, and be open to meeting other people and networking.
Thanks. And Jesse, and also you did have,
Yeah, I saw that.
yeah.
Okay, so first of all, the question that Cole asked, anything I wish I'd done differently? No. I love my life. I love my job. Everything is just freaking peachy. But one thing I wish I'd known earlier so that I could wrap my head around it and maybe like come to terms with it sooner is that life, your career is going to be just a series of group projects. And if you don't like group projects, you need to make peace with that because for those of you who are wondering how to like break into different library spheres, committee work, and all of that stuff, just an endless stream of group projects. And it is such an incredible way to make a great impression on people in different fields, at different organizations, and all of that. And so how you present yourself and how you carry your weight in a committee setting, it's all kind of foundational to group work. So know in advance that how you handle group work is going to be like so massively impactful for your career. And then somebody in the Q&A asked, how were you able to recover after being fired? What did you learn most from that experience? And that is that's a subject that I never mind talking about. But it was tough. It shook me. I never dreamed that I would get fired without the chance to make good. And I was fired without cause. I was quite great at my job, but what I wasn't was my supervisor's cup of tea. And so it was really difficult to wrap my head around, not having the opportunity to fix whatever was broken, because it caught me very much off guard. So I guess in short, kind of like radical acceptance of what has happened. I could have sued. I could have gone down like a long, frustrating road. But forcing myself to be where I wasn't wanted at that time, it seemed like a toxic endeavor. So I saw my therapist, who luckily I already had a pre-existing relationship with. And then I started dreaming about the life I wanted to build for myself. Because if Regina Public Library wasn't it, then what was it? And so I used my severance and the time that bought me, to invest in myself. I started going to the gym and exercising a lot more. I adopted a kitten and then a puppy. And I kind of like doubled down on investing in myself and rediscovering, the aspects of myself that had kind of gotten buried in the course of doing 3 degrees and getting married and moving again and moving again and getting divorced. And so I took time to love myself and to just sort of like rediscover myself. And then I started exploring the wide world of libraries. And the toughest thing was overcoming the shame and the inherent embarrassment of like, was something wrong with you? No, nothing was wrong with me. Like and this comes from somebody who is deep in self-reflection. Like my supervisor didn't like me because I'm an independent thinker and an actor, and I was working in a very admin heavy environment. So the two things don't go super well together. So I understand that, and I kind of know now what I might have done differently. But like learning to talk about it and kind of laugh about it and forgive myself for not being somebody that I wasn't, that was the thing that took the longest. And so a library that I applied to just straight up asked me, like, why were you fired from Regina Public Library? And so I had to answer that question, and finding a way to answer it in a way that doesn't place blame and also doesn't absolve myself and present myself as having been perfect and wronged and a victim. So like finding the language to talk about it, along with the acceptance of it, that was kind of the difficult part and the longest journey. And I guess the thing that worked best for me was, I worked with it so much that I was desensitized to it. And I now talk about it with a laugh because I am like, it was for the best. And I have all these great relationships. Like my leadership team from when I was at RPL, we still have a group chat. We still consult each other on professional matters. We still go for brunch. Nothing meaningful was taken away from me. It was just the start of another adventure. And it ended up really great. So yeah, it's not the end of the world. If it happens to you, call me. We will talk. I have actually talked to other people through getting fired. And it's okay, and it will be okay. So I'm not saying be brash and don't care about what happens, but I am saying if it happens, it will be okay.
Thanks, Bessie. I think we have time for one more. I see that Shania is, oh, and Sean is now typing on it. Oh, sorry, Shania. I was looking at this and then looking at you, so you go for it. Oh, you're muted.
My apologies.
All good.
As Sean is typing his answer, I'm just going to add to that question. I think if you are having a hard time advocating for yourself and for libraries in the workforce, it's a I could talk all day about it because it's an ongoing and will forever be an ongoing part of the job where you have to know when to advocate and how to advocate. Um, how what we do here at Berman, and I would say, especially if you work in a religious institution, which I do, Berman is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, so there's another layer to that. Um, Knowing your policies, your library policies, having your facts, knowing, keeping track of the great things your library has done for your community is a big thing. My colleagues and I, we keep statistics. On a regular basis, we communicate with our student body, our student newspaper, um, and trying to build a positive and welcoming environment in the library really does help that, because when your library becomes the center of negativity, you have your community to support you, and that will help um, kind of realize you're not alone in this process. And if you are the only person in this library, don't be afraid to reach out to other librarians in your area to see like, hey, this is the situation I'm in. Do you have any advice? What does your library do? What policies do you have in place? For us, if we were to ever have a book being wanting to be censored from our collection, we have a process. We have to have someone write up a statement. It has to go up to administration. Both sides have to read the book and discuss it. We have a library board that actually reviews all of these, and we have people from different areas on campus that review these. So I would say, first of all, you're not alone. And second, do your research and keep track of your statistics and um, know as much as you can about the library and what the good things it's done. And I know that's kind of convoluted, especially if you work in a school. I was fortunate enough when I came into this position, I left right before the government of Alberta put a book banning list on elementary schools. I was fortunate to leave right before I would have to start weeding my collection. Um, but I would say, again, vulnerability and speaking up for yourself, it takes practice, but the more you do it, the more naturally you'll come.
Yeah, I think the only thing I have to put on that, especially just in light of what's happening right now, is try to take a moment before you have a knee-jerk reaction to whatever you're trying to defend. Because I feel that a lot of things, they try to push you to react a certain way to defend the libraries in a certain way, but often, if you take a second to think about it, there's probably a better way to support and to use your advocacy. And that's probably good for a lot of things. Just take a second before you reply to anything, honestly. Yeah, Jesse.
I was just going to add one small thing to that. So I am from Saskatchewan, and in 2017, the government cut funding to the libraries by 60%, which for rural libraries was their entire budget. And that is something that people in library land in Saskatchewan will never forget. And cutting to the end of the story, that funding was reinstated. And the reason that it was reinstated was because we had a number of community advocates who went, I'm just going to say, ape shit across the province. And they did what people in the profession could not easily do. They rallied the community, they spoke out, they arranged events, and they made it all possible for us as professionals to show up and support without having to actively arrange civil disobedience. And so if you're ever looking for inspiration, look for the Save Our Libraries campaign in Saskatchewan from 2017. The two people who were the we'll say ringleaders in the province was one of them was a farmer, and the other one was a teacher who asked not to be named in the what followed. And so yeah, having those community leaders willing to step up and lead the rally cry is so important. And so when things are calm, cultivate those people in your community, because you never know when you're going to need them.
Just as a real quick addendum to Jesse's very good advice and thoughts there, is if you are engaging in civil disobedience, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but it is a requisite of so many jobs in the library world to have a clear criminal record. Be careful about what you're doing. Know what you're doing. Have it pre-planned as much as possible. Take all precautions. Do not ruin your career trying to protect an industry you won't be allowed to work in.
I love that. Interesting from the law perspective that I don't always have on this. So that's great. Okay, so oh wow, perfect. 3:30. Love that. This has been amazing. Thank you again to all the panelists sharing all your really interesting and wonderful thoughts about all of this. And thank you to the attendees for bringing some great Q&A questions that brought out some really interesting stuff. I just want to reiterate that, yeah, everybody's going to get a recording of this probably in like a week or so. And if you have any further questions for any of these panelists, I'm sure they would be happy to oblige. Just send an email to me and then I will pass things on. And I guess any panelists, if you had anything you wanted to share with everybody, I'm going to be sending out that registration thing as just a regular email. So you can pass me anything and I'll make it a nice, big, beautiful, informational email. So yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your beautiful Wednesday. I honestly thought it was Thursday for a second. Had to look at my watch, but forget it. It's a Thursday. And I can see, yeah, great. Yep. We'll say bye. I don't know how much we want to say thank you. I like seeing all the thank yous in the webinar chat, so that's good.
Thanks for inviting us, Cole.
Yeah,
Very much.
totally.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
No problem. It's really great. I love doing this event. It's always super interesting. I love getting people from different sectors all together in one webinar, just because you guys are going to have all slightly different experiences, slightly different perspectives, but then you kind of also can see that we're all not so different. There's a lot of transferable skills. There's a lot of similarities, even though when you look at jobs, they kind of, some of them are like, whoa, what is going on here? And like Sean, I think said at the beginning, you can, if you know how to say it, you can spin your skills to do a lot of stuff.
Absolutely.
A lot. We're all just information managers. Like it's just kind of this vague thing. Anyway, yes. All right, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.